Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Mr. Harvey here. Let's talk about the English Civil War. We're going to be talking about the interregnum, the Glorious Revolution. Today we're going to be really focused on, and this is in chapter 5, focused on what on earth is going on in England and eventually Great Britain during the 1600s and early 1700s, okay? So in the previous lecture, ladies and gentlemen, we focused on the Dutch, what was going on in this Dutch Golden Age during the 1600s. Today we're going to be focusing on the English. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so today we're going to be focusing on a huge political, economic, social, and intellectual development of constitutionalism and the evolution of England from, a purely, monarchy-dominated type of government to constitutionalism, to where parliament, we're going to see a parliamentary monarchy, which England still has today, start to dominate in England. Okay, so let's get into it. All right, let me give you some context first. All right, we know that in Europe the Dutch were a republic. We talked about that. Okay, but everywhere else, governments were typically monarchies. We're going to see that in France. We're going to see that within the HRE, Prussia, Russia, Spain. Okay, governments were typically monarchies. All right. But what we're going to see, ladies and gentlemen, especially in the 1600s and 1700s, is we're going to start to see, kind of a divide, okay, a divergence, all right? And we're going to see the creation of two different types of dominant monarchies in Europe. We're going to see England kind of go to a more progressive and liberal type of monarchy, which is going to be a parliamentary monarchy. And we're going to see France kind of go the opposite way and really buckle down on absolutism, okay? But we're going to see these two, really important powers in Europe go different ways. And that's important because this is going to have really key influences in the politics, the society, economics later on in Europe, okay? Let's talk about the English. All right, we're going to be focusing on England and the creation of this constitutional monarchy, this parliamentary monarchy. All right, now, England during the 1600s, ladies and gentlemen, was going through some dramatic changes. Last time we really focused on England, we had talked about the Tudors. We had seen, obviously, the creation of the Anglican Church, a lot of change. Now in the 1600s, we're going to be talking about the Stuarts, all right? But what's going on in England during the 17th century? Well, there's a lot going on when it comes to their economy. There's a high degree of social mobility due to this strong Atlantic economy that they have. We'll talk more about the Atlantic economy in Chapter 8. But England is making money. They are slowly starting to build their English empire, and we're seeing them get involved in the American colonies, India. They are slowly starting to spread their influence worldwide. All right. Agriculturally, England is at the forefront of the agricultural revolution, and that is going to be really important for us because England is also going to be starting to get into the early phases of an industrial revolution. That is going to be starting, especially as they get closer and closer to the 1700s. But agriculture is starting to boom in England, and again, this relates to their Protestantism, their openness to new ideas. So improved agriculture. They have a large middle class. They have a gentry, very important social group for us to understand. They're part of the upper middle class. They're wealthy landowners. They are not nobles. And the gentry were very important in Parliament. They actually dominated politics in the House of Commons. And I'm going to be splitting this lecture up into multiple parts. Later on, when we talk about the cabinet system and the rise of prime ministers, I'll kind of talk a little bit about the House of Commons versus the House of Lords and how that works in Parliament. But the gentry, very important group in Parliament, in the House of Commons. Okay, and something really important for us to understand about England, and I talked about this when I talked about the English Reformation, was that England had precedent. Okay, they have always kind of had this history of limiting the power of the king on economic and political matters. They've done this before. 1215 Magna Carta. They, put some rules on what a king can do and cannot do. All right, they have history with this. They have precedent with this. And so when we talk about the English Civil War and what they're going to be doing in the Glorious Revolution and what goes on, The English have done this before. This is part of their history. Okay, they have done this before. All right. Something that's going to be really interesting for us, especially when we get closer to the French Revolution, which we are. It's amazing. We're in chapter 5 already. We're only a few chapters away from the French Revolution. That's chapters 10 and 11. Is that taxes? The gentry in English were very much willing to pay taxes so long as Parliament, aka gentry and the English who had representatives in Parliament, had a say within that. So as long as they knew where that money was going and they had a little bit of control into where that money went. Okay, there's not a stigma of paying taxes in England as there is in France. We're going to see the first and second estates in France, the clergy and the nobility. They're not going to want to pay taxes at all. All right, and we'll get into that taxation situation a little bit later when we discuss the French Revolution. But the English, they're cool with paying taxes. All right, they just want to know where that money goes. Okay, and they want to have a little bit of control over where that money goes. All right, that's important for us. All right, it's taxes, also going to be religion, which we'll get into. But taxes is going to be a huge issue that brings Parliament into conflict with the monarchy and is going to really kick off that English Civil War. Taxes is going to be a huge, huge, huge contentious point of conflict. And we're going to get into that with the English Civil War. Okay? Religion is also going to play a focal point, ladies and gentlemen, in England and their politics and in the Civil War during the 17th century, okay? Now, important for us to remember, okay, Calvinists comprised a very large percentage of the population by the early 1600s. Calvinists are there, right? Now, if we go back to Elizabeth, right? Elizabeth was able to really, handle the Calvinists, okay? But they're a bigger part of the population now, okay? Now that the Stuarts are in control, all right? And we're going to see the Anglican Church start to lose ground a little bit, all right? And the group that we need to know when it comes to the Calvinists, that when it comes to the Protestant religion within England are the Puritans, okay? The Puritans are really important. And the Puritans, if we remember, right, and I talked about this, they were called Puritans. They are Calvinists because they sought to purify the Church of England by removing any Catholic elements from the Church of England. They wanted no Catholicism in the Church of England, and we know that that Puritans, especially some more of the radical Puritans, were really upset with Elizabeth with her Elizabethan settlement because, and if we remember, right, that Elizabethan settlement mixed in Catholicism and Protestantism. The Puritans are not cool with that, and we're going to see later on with the Stuarts, they're going to make some serious mistakes, and that's going to light the Puritans. That's going to make the Puritans pretty upset. Okay. And the Puritans, like I said, were highly opposed to any influence of Catholicism, the Catholic Church in England. Okay, and we're going to see that. We're going to see that kind of go off in the 1600s. All right. Also, really important for us to understand is this Episcopal system versus the Presbyterian system. Puritans are not going to like the Episcopal system. I'm going to kind of go through that a little bit later. And they wanted a Presbyterian system. Okay, and I'll kind of talk about why. But Puritans are a group that's going to play a really important part. It's not like you need to memorize all this. Puritans are going to play a really important part in this Civil War that is coming. Okay, let's move on. All right, let's talk about this Episcopal system versus the Presbyterian system. All right, the Episcopal system is where the church has bishops and archbishops, where they're governed by that. Puritans are not going to like bishops and archbishops. Why? Well, those are Catholic entities, Catholic elements. Remember, the Puritans don't want any Catholicism in the Church of England. They're not stoked with the Episcopal system because the church is being governed, controlled by these Catholic entities. What they want is a Presbyterian system where the church is more independent and is governed by like a representative type of elder. Okay, more like a respected, non-Catholic religious leader. All right, so they prefer, ladies and gentlemen, this Presbyterian system. Okay, let's talk about the Stuarts, ladies and gentlemen, of the 17th century. All right, the Stuarts are going to be taking over. All right, and they are going to really lose control of this situation. All right, so let's kind of review back, ladies and gentlemen. What was the family that we studied before that in England? The Tudors, and you should know our Tudors, ladies and gentlemen. Let's review them really quickly, right? We have Henry the Seventh, Henry the Eighth, Edward the Sixth, Mary, and Elizabeth. Need to know your tutors. We know that Elizabeth did not have, Elizabeth had no heir, so Mary, Queen of Scots' son, James, is going to take over, and he's going to, Mary, Queen of Scots, her name was Mary Stuart. We're going to see James take over. Now, the Stuarts, they make some serious mistakes, all right? They supported absolutism, all right? And they lacked Elizabeth's political savvy. They lacked her political intelligence, okay? In other words, they were kind of stupid, all right? They made some stupid mistakes. And we're going to see that really bite them, okay? Bite them in the tail. And they're going to, we're going to see them really, lose control of England, all right? And the Stuarts that we need to know, all right, I kind of call it the Charles sandwich, all right, is James, Charles, James. Now y'all are looking at me like, Harv, what? I know, the same names, all right, but we got James, Charles, James, okay? James and Charles the first, and then Charles and James the second, all right? These guys make some serious mistakes, some really dumb mistakes, especially Charles the First. Let's talk about them. Okay. But before I get into the talk about them, ladies and gentlemen, the two main issues prior to the English Civil War, ladies and gentlemen, are this. All right, and these are kind of questions that you need to be, thinking about as you think about the English Civil War. Is that, can kings govern without the consent of Parliament, aka can kings rule in absolute fashion? All right. And what type of system is going to be within the Anglican Church? It's going to be Episcopalian or it's going to be Presbyterian? Are they going what type of system are they going to believe in? Two main issues. Okay, two main issues. Let's talk about James. All right, he took over for Elizabeth, ladies and gentlemen. He believed in absolutism. He believed in the divine right of kings. Let's make sure we have that in our notes. We highlight that. That means that he believed that it was his divine right. He got this right from God to become the king, okay? And he believed in absolutism, aka he believed he did not need Parliament. That Parliament had no right to question him, okay? And obviously we can kind of see where this is going to be going, because Parliament's going to be like, dude, what? So James really had some pretty radical notions, okay? And he wanted to and expected to kind of rule with minimal consultation of Parliament. He expected really to be able to ignore them and get away with it. And we know that England has a history of, hey, if the kings are abusing their power, England's going to call them on it. The people will call them on it. And they are definitely going to call James and especially Charles out. Okay, he's gonna dissolve Parliament multiple times over taxation issues and create a lot of distrust with Parliament. And Parliament is not going to be super stoked with James nor Charles. Okay, so it's really important for us to understand that there's going to be a lot of distrust between the monarchy and Parliament. Okay. Also, ladies and gentlemen, because his mother was Catholic, okay, he was seen as sympathetic to Catholics. All right, and that's he was believed to have had Catholic sympathies, and that's going to create a lot of distrust with the Puritans. So you got Parliament, and you got the Puritans who are keeping a close eye on the monarchy. All right, so the clouds are kind of gathering for this English Civil War. Let's talk about the monarch who really instigates this English Civil War. That's Charles. Similar to his dad. All right, believed in divine right, believed in absolutism, did not want to consult with Parliament. Okay, and he's also going to try to bring religious conformity throughout all of England and Scotland with the Anglican system of Episcopalianism. And we are going to see the Puritans be quite upset with him, all right? And this, ladies and gentlemen, illustrates, and what I'm trying to get at is Charles and James do not have that political foresight that Elizabeth did. By making these radical changes, Charles and James, it's Charles that's going to be doing this, but James and Charles kind of did the same thing. In that they are making enemies of the Puritans, and it's almost like they're picking a fight. And we know that Elizabeth, with her Elizabethan settlement, really tried to ease religious tensions and calm things down. Charles James and especially Charles are doing the opposite. Okay, they're inflaming tensions, and it's just not a good situation. Okay, Scotland's gonna be unhappy with this because Scotland is predominantly Calvinist. Okay, Presbyterian, and we're gonna see Charles start to be pretty reckless when it comes to foreign policy. He's gonna go to war with Spain, and he needs money. And Parliament's not going to give him the money because they don't trust him, and they didn't trust his dad either. So we have some problems starting. Okay, so we got James and Charles, the Stuarts. Let's talk about this Petition of Right. Let's take some good notes, and I'm gonna just kind of briefly go through this, and then I'm gonna stop the lecture. I'm gonna cut the lecture a little bit in half. So we're gonna go kind of right up to the Civil War. But an important kind of development before the war starts is this Petition of Right. And Parliament, states that if Charles wants more money, that he needs to, sign this Petition of Right. And these are some of the things that they want Charles to agree to. Okay, one is that only Parliament could levy taxes. Parliament controls the power of the purse. Let's make sure we write that down. Who controls the money? Parliament controls the money. And remember, this goes back to the gentry who are in Parliament. They have no problem paying taxes. They just want to know where that money's going. And Charles just wants to spend that money and not even consult him. And the gentry are like, dude, I don't know about that. So Parliament wants to control the money. All right. 2, no one is imprisoned without due process of the law. And this is important. Parliament's saying, hey, if we have a disagreement, you can't just throw some of us in prison. All right. We should have due process of the law. We should be able to see a judge, have a jury, have a trial. Can't just throw us in prison for as much as you want. Okay. And have the right to habeas corpus, which is the right to see a judge, the right to understand, the right to have rights if you're under arrest. Okay, having rights under arrest, and it's this idea with especially provisions 2 and 3 that Charles just can't do whatever he wants when it comes to the law. There are rules. All right, no forced quartering of soldiers in homes. All right, so Parliament has some serious provisions, ladies and gentlemen, and Charles will sign it, but he's going to ignore it. Okay, so he's going to sign it and ignore it. And this is going to create an even bigger problem. Parliament's like, bro, dude, what? Really? It's like that? All right, we can kind of see where this is going. And this is kind of why I really frown on Charles and James. And that's a dumb mistake. All right, that is going to make a conflict even bigger and worse. All right, and so Charles really is digging himself a hole right now because he, with this Petition of Right and just, by not consulting with Parliament, he is really making some enemies. And this is obviously later on, he's going to be killed for this. He's going to be executed for this. This is going to be a big deal. All right, definitely not as smart and politically savvy as Elizabeth. All right, so he's going to dissolve Parliament until about 1640. All right, and rule in an absolute fashion for a period of time, ladies and gentlemen, for about 11 years, all right? He's going to be raising taxes, ignoring that Petition of Right, and he's going to be raising taxes without Parliament. He's going to be using more medieval techniques, and it's not super important exactly what techniques is, but he's ignoring Parliament. He's ignoring them, and he's completely disregard that Petition of Right. He's like, whatever, I don't care, all right? Not a smart move, man. Not a smart move, and he's going to pay for it, all right? He's also going to go after the Puritans, religiously persecute them, go after them, all right? Mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. And you can see, if we were to write like a little compare and contrast with Charles and Elizabeth, there is no comparison on just how Charles is going to be losing control of the situation because he does not listen, and he simply is not understanding the political, social, and religious pulse, economic pulse of England. Okay, not listening. All right, let's talk about this short Parliament of 1640. All right, we're going to see a Scottish revolt occur when Charles attempts to impose an Anglican English prayer book on the Scottish Presbyterian Church, and he's going to be again going after the Presbyterians, the Calvinists in Scotland, and instigating religious tensions. And we saw that was the exact opposite of what Elizabeth did. And when the Scottish revolt goes down, he needs money, and he's going to convene Parliament. And Parliament's going to look at him and go, really? Okay, and they're not going to give him anything unless he agrees to correct their grievances, politically and religiously. And so Parliament's like, okay, let's sit down. Let's talk about this. Hey, that petition of right, man, you ignored it. Not cool. All right. You need to apologize, and we need to fix this situation, because you and I'm talking about Parliament and Charles, Parliament's like, hey, we are not getting along. This is not working. Okay. But he's simply just going to disband them and be like, whatever. Just silly. Like, really? Not a good move. And ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to write all this down to all these facts, okay? The big idea that I'm trying to get at is illustrating Charles's, lack of political intelligence right here, lack of political savvy, right? Not understanding the pulse of what is going on. Okay, so we have the Long Parliament from about 1640 to about 1660. This is Parliament. It actually didn't meet for 20 years, but this is going to be really symbolic of all this upheaval that we're about to experience in England. So he was desperate for money in his battle with the Scots, and he's going to convene Parliament, and Parliament's going to refuse to dissolve without having their demands met. Okay. So Parliament's going to be like, we are not leaving until our demands are met. And he's going to agree those demands, okay? And here are some of the demands. Parliament cannot be dissolved without its own consent. So Parliament has to consent to being dissolved. He can't just be like, all right, Parliament, all right, bye, Parliament. He can't just do that, all right? Parliament has to meet a minimum of once every 3 years, all right? He's going to abolish that Court of Star Chamber that was created under Henry Tudor, Henry VII. And they're also going to kill Charles's chief advisor and archbishop. And that's kind of foreshadowing, hey, this is a warning to him. Hey, man, stop crossing us. Sit down. Let's talk about this. Okay, you cannot just do everything you want. All right, you can't just run over us. You cannot just ignore us. We need you to listen to us. Let's talk about this. All right, let's be reasonable about this. Okay, there's Parliament. Parliament exists for a reason. All right. All right. Well, Charles is going to make a really silly mistake. It just not smart at all. And he's actually going to try and arrest several enemies of Parliament. Well, the members of Parliament that he was after heard about it, and they simply just didn't show up to Parliament. So he's going to storm into Parliament, try to arrest some people. They're not going to be there. And he has really burned his bridge with Parliament. He was simply going to go in there with a show of force, arrest people who disagreed with him, and imprison them. And the Parliament's just going to look at him and be like, "Hey, it's on now." Okay, so he's going to leave, raise an army, and Parliament's going to raise its own, and the English Civil War is on. Okay, and let's write this date down from 1642 to 1649. And so the English Civil War has started, and this was all preventable, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, if Charles had simply listened, if Charles had simply been flexible with his power, been willing to compromise, okay, kind of like what Elizabeth did. If he had put his country before himself, he could have avoided this. Unfortunately, he did not. Silly mistake after silly mistake. He could have avoided all of this. And this English Civil War is on. Okay. But the larger cause about this, ladies and gentlemen, that I want you all to think about is this was king versus Parliament and the religious persecution of Puritans, okay? So the larger cause we're seeing here, ladies and gentlemen, is who has the power, all right? Who has the power? Is it a king or is it Parliament, okay? And this is Parliament and the king fighting for power. And spoiler alert, Parliament's going to win this, okay? So let's talk about the two groups really quickly, and then I will stop there. Actually, I'm going to stop here for right now, ladies and gentlemen. And I will continue the second half of this lecture in the following lecture. All right, thank you.